Alright, this is my first episode of Fallen World that's not actually live, but I wanted it to feel like a live stream, so I uploaded it as a premiere with a live chat. I'm not actually here right now, so I can't really do my live stream, um, but I can watch it and reply to your comments in the live chat, so if you have any questions, go ahead and ask, and instead of answering them in the video, I'll just answer them as a reply to your comment. And if you are not watching this live and you want to see the comments, just click on the live chat replay and you can see all the questions and answers. There probably won't be many because usually people don't comment on my videos, but just it's there if you want it. So I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking about like existence and how there's so much disagreement on what it is, why it is, what we're supposed to do about it. And I mean, that's really what you want to know when you just come into the world and you take a look at life and you just say, what the fuck is this? What is it? Why is it? What am I supposed to do about it? And yeah, so we use a lot of different methods to answer these questions. Some people just come into the world, they never bother having to ask because they just are brought up with a religion, or they learn things about it in school from science, things like that. But I want you to just forget everything that you've ever learned about existence, about anything. Just erase all of it. Because to be perfectly blunt, there is a lot of bullshit floating around, and you don't know how much of what you've learned is coming from a biased place or a place of manipulation and control. You don't know how much of what you know is actually something that you know. So just forget everything, and we're going to start from scratch here. And by the end of this, you should have a nice set of tools of things that you know for sure. And then you can use that and, then remember what you've learned before and try and figure out how it applies to that. But if you're keeping in mind what you already learned while you're watching this, you're going to be just constantly thinking of like arguments or, wait, does that contradict what I believe? Then I disagree with it and stuff like that. So just be completely fresh and new, like a baby just here to learn. And we're going to talk about, I narrowed it down to 3 things. So I was thinking, how can I narrow it down to just things we can be certain of? And I ended up writing like 10 sentences. And then I thought, no, I feel like all of these 10 things are still based on the same concepts that keep coming up. So eventually I narrowed it down to just 3 words. And they all end in a Y, and it just kind of looks like professional. So I said, okay, let's do this. So it's called The 3 Tools. And each of the 3 chapters is about the 3 tools. So once you have these tools, it'll be a lot easier to understand everything, and it'll be a lot easier to just make sense of life and go about it in a way that doesn't feel biased, I guess. So chapter 1 is called Energy. Energy is electricity, vibrational frequencies, kind of the fuel that allows existence. So without energy, nothing would be able to exist. So energy is kind of all that exists. And energy is behind everything. But conscious beings don't necessarily have to believe that. Because when you're conscious, you have the ability to choose things, which I don't want to. I'll just go into chapter 2, duality, because this is kind of how the reason that I put them in this order is they segue into each other really nicely. So everything that's real has an equal opposite and usually comes with a scale. So by everything that's real, I mean everything that isn't man-made. Like you could come up with a word that humans invented that technically doesn't have an opposite, or a situation that humans have decided to pick out and say, well, this specific situation doesn't have an opposite. But I wouldn't necessarily say that that's real. You're just sort of saying, well, does a candle have an opposite? Just, because candle, like that kind of thing. But everything that's real has an opposite. And it's generally, not always, but there's generally a scale between the two. And rather than just the black and the white, there's usually gray and then light gray and dark gray. You know what I mean? Like it goes up. So there's dark gray, light gray, white, kind of like that. So it's not just black and white, but I'm sure that it's possible that there are exceptions. There are some things that are just one or the other. But usually there's a scale between these two extreme opposites, but there's always opposites. And to be conscious means to have the ability to choose kind of where you're going to be. If you think of energy on that scale, if energy is sort of like everything that exists, then energy sort of is the scale, and you also as energy have to decide if you're going to use a scale of opposites, if you're going to go high or low. And I want to use the example, I should probably read what I have written here before I go off on a tangent. For conscious beings, their energy exists on a scale between light and dark. Dark embodies fear and chaos, while light embodies love and harmony. That makes sense. Okay, so, yeah. So, if you think of it as a scale between light and dark, or high vibrational frequency or low vibrational frequency, or positive or negative, there's all sorts of opposites. There's, gender kind of exists in everything. There's always male and female, and again, it's a scale, but it's a scale between those two things because they're real and they're just part of existence. It's sort of like how everything just comes in twos and with an opposite. So that's why duality is one of the three truths that we can be certain of. I don't think anybody can really argue that white is the opposite of black, that there is such a thing as opposites. Of course there is. No one would say there's no such thing as opposites. It's very plain to see that. And if you think of energy, if we're energy, if everything is energy, if nothing could really exist without energy, because it's almost like the fuel that allows for existence to be, then you could say that you are energy and you have to choose on a scale of high and low. And without that choice, without that free will, you wouldn't really technically be conscious. You'd have no awareness of your existence because you wouldn't be able to make decisions. You wouldn't be able to decide anything. You would just sort of be there. You wouldn't have any awareness that you're there because you're not really there anyway. You're just something without free will doesn't really exist, I think. It's almost just like an illusion from the beings that do have free will. So that's kind of what consciousness is. Consciousness is free will. And I think we can be pretty reasonably certain that we are conscious, that we do have free will, because even though you could say that everything is sort of a reaction to something else, something moves and then something else reacts to it, and, it's sort of like a domino effect. Everything that moves creates a series of events after that, like the butterfly effect. But the thing is that you aren't really part of that because you're not really part of the physical world that applies to, where you knock over a domino and then the one falls behind it. You're sort of like the one who pushed the dominoes. You're really the only one who has any ability to make changes because it sort of exists for you and kind of complements you. Everything needs a witness to exist. Without a witness, there's no proof that anything exists. And you're the witness, so you're not really part of it. You're just sort of there. And it's a little hard to explain. I realize that can be confusing, but maybe I can elaborate more on this after I finish chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Infinity. We know something can't come from nothing, so nothing never existed. So if you think of the idea of something being able to be born out of nothing, picture nothing. You can't even picture it because there's no such thing as nothing. You don't know what nothing looks like. You can't imagine it. You can't play with the idea in your mind because there's no such thing as nothing. So if you're picturing a time before the universe was born, okay, well, let's say that before the universe, there was another universe, and it's just a repeating cycle. Or, but what about existence? Like, where did the cycle begin? It really didn't begin. It doesn't have an origin, because if there was a time when nothing existed, it would have stayed that way. Nothing can't do anything. It can't create a universe or create a cycle of a universe, dying and then repeating and rinse and repeat. It can't do that because it's nothing. So nothing never existed, which means that on some level you have to accept infinity. You have to accept the idea that that there really just is something that always existed. I think infinity is a fact. The way that I have it written here is that if there was ever a time when nothing existed, it would have stayed that way. Something must have always existed without an origin. So infinity is a fact. And you can't really argue that. You could say, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, did the egg just appear out of nowhere? Or was there a series of events that led to the egg existing if the egg came first or if the chicken came first? It doesn't really matter which one came first because, there's a lot that you could wonder. You could say the same thing about humans. Who was the first human? Where did the first human come from? And, where did that come from? Whatever created the first human? You could keep going back. And you could say, well, if God created the universe, where did God come from? And eventually you just have to accept that you're not going to always find an answer, because every time you answer it, every time you say, well, this came from that and this came from that, and you keep going back and back trying to find an origin, trying to find the first thing that started all of this, you're never going to find it, because time doesn't work that way. Everything is kind of infinite. It's boundless. It's not really like limited to our understanding of time as a line, or the idea of infinity being a circle or a loop, an 8. It's not a loop. Infinity isn't a loop. Infinity is just completely infinite. It's not a line. It's not a loop. It's almost like a line that goes up and to the side and this way and that way and just all directions and everywhere and everything. That's infinity. There is no origin. It's just something that has always existed. So if you can understand that and accept the idea that infinity is real, it becomes a lot easier to kind of throw out your understanding of time and how things work and just say, well, clearly there must be something that has just always existed. And I think it's energy, because we know from science, from testing, that energy can't be created, it can't be destroyed. It can only transform. It changes its shape. It changes all over the place. But it doesn't die. Energy doesn't die. And therefore, and technically it's only that we haven't been able to prove that it can die yet. But if we've been around this long and we still haven't found any information that contradicts the idea that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, I think it's safe to say it's the truth. But it isn't technically, it hasn't gone through all the things it needs to go through to be considered a fact, or so I've been told by somebody who acted like they knew what they were talking about. It's not a big deal. It's just I like talking to people and learning information, talking to strangers online and trying to get a bunch of different perspectives, so I actually make sure I know what I'm talking about and I'm not just, blabbing away and all of a sudden somebody says, well, actually, if you just had this one bit of information, you would have realized that everything you were saying was stupid. So I do test what I say first, and I make sure it's accurate, I make sure that it can't be argued, and I make sure I'm not missing anything important that I should be adding. So, yeah, that happened one time. And, that's all that I was referring to. So, I've already read everything on here, which means anything else I say before the video ends is just me explaining and elaborating. So, yeah, so energy doesn't die, it only transforms. Duality is one of the three truths, because we know that everything has an opposite and everything kind of comes in twos. But then if you think about energy, you could almost say that it's like with the duality thing, which is an important piece. I think that's one of the tools that a lot of people leave out, but it is a really important one, because when you understand things on a scale, I could say you walk into a room and everybody is screaming and fighting, and there's a lot of really, really like negative emotions, and there's crying, and you walk into that room and immediately you want to get out of there. All you feel, it's like you just walked into a thunderstorm and you just got rained on or struck by lightning. That's how you're going to feel. But if you walk into a room, just as there is a thunderstorm and a rainy day, there's also sunny days. You walk into a room and people are having the time of their lives, and they're complimenting each other and genuinely enjoying themselves and just happy and at peace. You're going to not want to leave that room. You're going to be like, hey, I actually enjoy this. This is a really nice sunny day versus a storm, and I'm not getting soaked in rain. So we have to acknowledge that these opposites exist and that it's energy-based. I mean, logically, if you look at it just from a material perspective, it's just a bunch of skin, a bunch of flesh, blobs, this meat suits just running around making vibrational frequencies with their mouth at each other, and water coming from their eyes. If you look at it from that perspective, that's just all that it is. But there's a lot of emotion there, And that's the energy. You're feeling it. You don't have to hear it explained to you in words to understand that you don't want to be in that room. It is making you uncomfortable, and it's like draining your own energy and your own positivity. So positive and negative. There's positivity and negativity. There's positive and negative. I tried saying both of those things somehow at the same time, and it didn't work out, obviously. But yeah. So there's positive and negative, and you want to make sure that you're always trying to stay up at the top, the positive in the scale. And that's why it's important to understand the duality of it. You have to understand what each one means, because the dark at the bottom, you could say light is at the top, dark is at the bottom, God at the top, devil at the bottom, however you want to think of it. Dark embodies fear, so it's this uncertainty, it's this lack of faith. And it's sort of like, instead of coming into the world and saying, I know that I didn't create all of this, I know that I don't know what it is, and I know that whatever it is, whatever this mysterious existence is, obviously it's not out to get me, because I wouldn't exist without it. I owe my existence to whatever this is, so I have to be able to trust it and not be afraid of it. And if you kind of humble yourself and say that, and you just kind of ask, you know, what is this? What am I supposed to do? What am I? Who am I? Where am I? What's going on? And just like humbly wait for an answer. You'll kind of feel it in your gut, and it'll feel like that still small voice, that kind of peaceful knowing. And you can just work with it through faith instead of worrying, but is that the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? What if it's just my imagination? All of that is stuff that you learn after you grow up. If you're brand new in the world, you're not going to have anything like that holding you back. So you can just kind of feel it and work with existence. But you have to make sure you're working with the positive part of it, because if you're working with the negative energies around you, they're not coming from that place of faith. They're coming from a place of fear. They come into the world, and instead of saying, I'm humble, I don't know what any of this is, but I'm ready to work with it, and I trust it because I know I owe my existence to it. You say, I don't know what any of this is, but I don't like it. I don't like that there's pain involved. I'm in pain. This is chaos. It is pure chaos, and I didn't ask to be thrown into it. This is not fair, and therefore I'm owed healing. I'm owed something, and I feel entitled to take whatever I think I deserve. And then you just walk around and you steal medicine off someone that they were planning on distributing evenly to people who actually knew what to do with it. And then you take it and you use it all. And then you don't know what to do except go steal more medicine. But if the person who you took it from was able to do what they were trying to do, they could have given it to people who used it to get back up on their feet and take responsibility for their own lives instead of going around looking for more things to steal from other people. You can't live your life just always wanting to take, feeling like a victim, and choosing to be afraid and make decisions from a place of fear, because that's chaos. It's completely chaotic. You're not in control. You're like, you're like a robot that got covered in water, just like, glitching out, and you don't know what you're doing. Nobody wants to be around that. People are going to go away from that because you're not in control. You don't even know what you're going to do next. And you don't know why you're doing anything you're doing. You don't have a reason. You don't have logic. You just kind of go to go. And, the way that I'm describing it, you probably don't think that applies to you. But I want you to think about your decisions and say, am I actually making decisions from a place of faith and positivity and love and empathy and just logic, just the idea that I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it, and I know where I'm going, instead of just, I don't know where I'm going or what I'm supposed to do, but this person said I should go this way, so I'm just going to go that way until it doesn't work anymore. And I'm going to always act like I know what I'm doing so nobody sees how afraid I actually am. And you think you know what you want, but really all you're doing is knowing what you need to survive. You know that you need to be secure and stable, financially stable and secure to survive, because if you're not financially stable, the chance of you surviving lowers. So it's all based on survival, which is fear. It's a primitive instinct, and it exists for a reason. Everything exists for a reason. But it's really coming from a place of ego, and ego also exists for a reason. But when people tell you that you have an ego problem, we immediately get defensive and say, I don't have an ego problem, I'm not all about myself and stuff like that. But that's not always what it means. It doesn't mean that you just love yourself a lot. It doesn't mean you're vain. It just means that you maybe are imbalanced, and you're not really making decisions from a place of empathy, but you're making decisions from a place of, how does this help me, and how can I benefit from this, and how can I survive? And it's all about survival. It's not really logic, and it doesn't help you either. It's not good for you. So when someone points it out, honestly, when someone says any kind of criticism to you, you have to be able to take it and say, okay, you know what? even if this person had cruel intentions and was trying to say something to hurt me, I'm going to take what they said and sit with it and consider it, instead of just brushing it off as this person was being mean and I want to defend myself. Because then you're being reactionary and you're proving them right. When you're doing that, you're coming from a place of ego. So even if they are too, you don't want to be part of that. You don't want to really stoop to their level. So yeah, there's a lot of other things that the dark embodies, but generally it's chaos. And with the light, it's generally harmony and logic and order and working kind of within a system that exists. You know that existence is real, because obviously it is, but you can also choose to believe that nothing is real and nothing matters, and take a nihilistic stance and say that nothing matters, I don't know what I'm doing, and then just kind of live your life on the whim of the moment and just not care who you hurt or what you do or anything. And that's up to you if you want to do that. But it's you're choosing chaos and you're choosing fear, and then you're kind of, if you actually measure on the scale of positive and negative, your vibrational frequency, your energy is going to be really low and toxic, and you're going to notice that you're actually not getting the most out of life that you could be. You're not enjoying anything. So you have to be humble, really, instead of entitled. That's kind of the key, is being humble and letting go of control. I just read this thing on Instagram that said peace is when you retrain your mind to see the world as it is instead of as you think it should be. Because that's really what it is. When you're not at peace, it's because you're thinking that things ought to be a certain way and they're not that way, and you just can't be okay with that. Now, there's a time and a place when something is not just, something is wrong. If you're looking at an injustice, a hate crime, something like that, and you're being disrespected, your boundaries are being disrespected, you should check out the video that I did last week if that resonates with you, because I talked about boundaries a lot in my last one. It's called Not My Responsibility. And I basically talked about how important it is to balance between being a sociopath and being a doormat, basically. Someone who's selfish, someone who doesn't care, someone who doesn't respect boundaries, someone who just does whatever they want. They don't care how you feel about it. They're just going to do what they want to do, versus someone who cares way too much about how other people feel and are super susceptible to being manipulated by people who feel entitled, people who think that it's your responsibility to take care of their feelings, and who don't actually say, you know what, this is my problem, these are my feelings, I'm not going to burden you with it, I'm not going to make you feel guilty. Honestly, if you ever notice that you're doing anything out of guilt, just stop. Guilt is not a motivation. You never, ever, ever, ever want to have guilt as your motivator. So if you ever catch yourself that you're doing something out of guilt or obligation or shame, stop. That's already wrong. And again, energy and this stuff that can be measured. We can prove that when you're making a decision from a place of guilt, you're coming from a lower, darker place on the scale. And that's really the closest thing that you can actually get to hell. And I also just want to say, for the religious people who believe that heaven and hell are places that people go to be rewarded or punished after they lived their life based on the decisions they made when they were alive, if you actually believe that it's a physical place that you go to, then you're kind of neglecting the fact that we can choose how we want to feel about anything in any given moment. If you go to heaven, you can choose to be miserable because you have free will as long as you're conscious. And if you don't have free will, if that's taken away from you and you're sort of forced to enjoy yourself, then you don't have free will. You don't even exist. You're not conscious. You're not aware of your existence. It's as if you're not even there. And that's not reality. Nobody can really take your free will away from you as long as you exist, and you will always exist. But if you were in heaven and you chose to be miserable, it's not really heaven anymore, is it? And if you're in hell, and you choose to be happy, even if you're getting burned, your skin's getting burnt off, somebody's, putting butt spiders up your butt, a reference to a show called The Good Place. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's really funny and it's really smart, actually. It's called The Good Place. It's on Netflix. And it was an NBC show, if you want to find it in some other way, if you don't have Netflix. But, so, yeah, The Good Place. Basically, if you're getting tortured and you just kind of grow numb to it, you're like, well, this has just happened to me so many times. I've just kind of dissociated. I dissociate, I'm numb to it. I'm going to go to a happy place in my mind and just pretend I'm not here. Then it's not really torture anymore, and the people torturing you are going to kind of feel like, what is the point of this? This person's not even experiencing it anymore. They dissociated. We have that ability because we have free will, and no one can take that away from you. If they do take it away from you, you don't even exist. So there goes the idea of heaven and hell being places. Heaven and hell, it's a state of mind. It's a choice that you make every minute, every day, consciously. And when you die, you still have that choice because you're just energy. And when you die, you just kind of lose the meat suit. So you're just energy in its raw form. And you can choose high or low still. And if you want to have a growth mentality and feel humble and not blame everybody for everything, not feel like a victim, or you want to stay feeling like a victim and hold on to control and fear and your ego. And if you hold on to your ego, it's going to weigh you down because it's heavy. And if you let go of it, you let go of control, you let go of everything you're holding on to, you can go up higher. And anything else you hold on to just weighs you down. And it's the same when you're alive. The afterlife really doesn't look that different from life. And that's coming from my own personal belief. So if you want to figure something else out to make that make sense, go right ahead. But it makes the most sense, and I've seen a lot of proof that proof of how things work, and just from my own personal experience. And I also have learned a lot from someone who also just speaks from their experience. So, and they value integrity. So I'm not like worried that they're lying, and I could have been at first, but I've known them long enough to trust them. So yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, just go ahead and ask in the comments, and I will reply in the live chat. But as for my video, I won't be able to. I have no idea what you're asking, so I'm just going to keep talking. Okay, so yeah, I think I covered everything. Yeah, I guess if you have any questions, I'm going to end the video now, so you won't be able to ask in the live chat, but just ask in the comments, and again, I'll reply to you. Nobody ever does that, but I think I covered everything. So yeah, if this contradicts your religion or your views, if you're not religious at all, if you're an atheist, whatever it is, I just want you to think about all of this and think about how it connects to things we know and can measure and can prove. And just think about it from a logical standpoint. Try to play with these ideas. These are the right toys to be using if you're going to toy around with these ideas. So if you want to play with philosophical stuff, make sure you have these 3 things here as kind of like the basics, and you can add in whatever you want and tell me what you guys come up with. But I just wanted to make sure you had these tools, so I'm offering them in this video. Thank you for watching. I hope this made sense. Again, if it didn't, I will gladly answer any questions or misconceptions. I'd just like to add, by the way, I personally think all religions are man-made, even though I do believe in a lot of spiritual stuff, because I think the universe is large, and I think that in a lot of different parts of the universe, there's a lot of different stuff going on. And the energy that we are has been all over the place in different parts of the universe, trying out different experiences and learning different lessons. And I think that coming to this part of the universe and coming to this planet as a human, I think we can be reasonably certain that we're the only beings in this part of the galaxy that have this level of consciousness, and that gives us a lot of potential to choose high or low. And we're almost being tested what we're going to choose, and if we're going to continue to choose ego and fear versus empathy and love, or empathy and faith. If you want to say faith is the opposite of fear, love and faith are kind of the same thing. It's all connected. There's a lot of synonyms for love. A lot of people think love means romantic. It doesn't. It's not how I'm using it. It doesn't mean romantic. It doesn't mean parent-child. It just means positivity. It just means, that feeling when you just are thinking about other people and harmony and connectivity and interconnectedness and how we're all connected to we're all kind of the same thing. I mean, even if you think about it from a physical standpoint of everything in the material world being the same thing, like everything in the material world is how do I put this? Everything in the material world kind of came from somewhere, and that can be studied and measured. And physically, there was just water at first, and we were like one cell in the sea at the beginning. It's the name of an album, actually. One of my favorite albums. It's really good. It's by the artist Define Frenzy, if you want to check it out. But it is scientifically accurate. So that's kind of like where life began. And that's from a physical, scientific standpoint. Energetically speaking, we're also all connected, and we're all kind of part of the same energy and I think the same consciousness. but we kind of, if you think of consciousness and energy and existence as all kind of the same thing, and you think of it as water, then you could think of a human being or an individual as being water being put into a water bottle. And in that moment, if I carry a water bottle with me, I say, this is my water bottle. And then you dump it back into the ocean, and now it's just part of the rest of the water. But it carries with it experiences. It's been in your bottle, it's been in your hands. And then when it goes into the water, it kind of takes that with it, and it becomes part of the rest of the water. And that's why I think energy kind of attaches to objects, and energy is everywhere, and there's high and low, dark and light energy in all sorts of different places. And you know, I mean, you can even walk into an empty room and feel like a really bad feeling. I want to get out of here. And then you walk into a different room and you don't feel that way. Energy exists in places. It's in rooms, it's on objects, it's everywhere. And you just have to make sure that you're avoiding dark energy and choosing to go high. Because if you're feeding into it, you're really just wasting your time and holding yourself down. Unless you're trying to heal it, but make sure should watch my video from last week, or take Ivy's class called Stay in Your Lane. Ivy Rivera, I mention her all the time. She has a video called Stay in Your Lane, and that's a good class to take. It's a free YouTube class, kind of like this, but it's like an hour, and it's a really good way to make sure that you know if you're interested in healing people and giving out positivity and just good things to other people. You want to make sure that you're staying in your lane, and you're making sure you're not going overboard, overgiving, giving when it's not your place to give, situations like that. But that's easiest to do when you're balanced. Everything is about balance. So, you know, like I said, duality is one of the three truths. You got to make sure you're not like freaking out. I think of light and dark less as on a scale from high and low, and I mean, it technically is, but as a way to understand it, it's more like you're walking a tightrope, and directly in front of you is the light. But if you waver, if you move a little bit, you can't really see the light anymore. All you see is the darkness surrounding it. The darkness is everywhere else, but the light, there's only one of it. Sort of like how there can be a million different versions of a situation, but there's only one true version. A million different lies, only one truth. There's only one light, and the light is the truth. But chaos can be everywhere. So you just have to make sure that you're balanced on the tightrope and you're going forward in the light instead of wavering around and being in the dark. And it can be a little confusing and tough to navigate, but just make sure you're trying and make sure you're interested and you don't get lazy with it. Because you remember, we're all connected, and everything that you do matters. So yeah, that's the conclusion. Thank you for watching. Ask your questions. See you next week.